Alright, YouTuber, back with the Airbus A380, and we're just trying to clean up some mistakes that were made or overlooks on my part with this design over here. We have this area of the wing where the decals have been allowed to separate, and we use some just rubber bands, and I mean they worked okay to kind of pull things down, but I came up with a better idea. Andrew Newton does a bunch of gliders and stuff, and he's really good. He's one of the guys that actually introduced me to the ASW28, him and Esteban actually. And I watched one of his videos. He was building a spring mechanism, and this spring mechanism seemed to work so good, and you can see how nice that works. But this is going to be without the risk of having a complete, catastrophic failure from having a piece of rubber band pop out. And so what I used was this KS Precision Metals music wire, stock number 500, 0.025 inch, which is also known as 0.64 millimeters. You just get this from your local hobby shop, and you can also buy it online in rolls and stuff if you don't mind buying a lot of it. But you can see how fine it is. It's very thin, and I basically measured 3.5 inch and then like about 1 inch on either side, and you just kind of you stick it into the foam, and then you get it to the angle where it gives you enough tension to pull it back. Now the longer the piece, the less tension you can get away with, and I found that the short piece was actually quite a bit of tension, like almost too much, so I went with a little bit longer. Okay, so once you have had a chance to kind of fiddle with it a little bit, you get it where you want it, and this is all it is. And so I'll glue this in when we get to that point. Okay, so it just slides in, and it'll be C8 in there, and then of course this will be stuck into the appropriate position. In our case, I also wanted to re-establish where this is going to go so that this slider doesn't hit it and bind up like it had been doing in this area. Now this side was the side that was being more effective. It was evidently deploying slightly higher because this wing would drop a lot easier. And you can see I got this nice clean cut here, and it kind of mimics the look it was before. It's not perfect, but this was never a scale point on the plane. And you see how it thins up here? That's just because I had to capture this portion that had been delaminated. Okay, so I wanted to show you how I went through the process of doing this so that you can copy along if you were copying along on yours to begin with. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do it. So basically, I want to emulate this very similarly. So I'm just going to carry this out from this point all the way out to where we're going to have, remember we taped a little bit further on this wing, and I want to try to make it look symmetrical. Okay, now we don't necessarily have to cut out as far. We can just leave this piece of tape here for the moment. But you see what I'm doing? I'm just looking over there where the silver ends at the end of the aileron, and I'm just kind of trying to copy the angle. And what you want to do is you want to score through whatever tape you've got, in this case, and then you want to score just deep enough so that you can get through the clear coat, because there's a clear coat all over this plane. You'll notice if you've got one. And then I have decals covering up the ugly Airbus, or not air, it says Airliner, and then it says like 380 on this side, with a dash in there unnecessarily. So I'm just going to go ahead and carry over. Now my decal, of course. Okay, so we just got that. And then the decal's thicker, so we have to be just a little bit more particular there. But you're not really trying to dive into the film at all, the clear film. You're just, it's more means to an end for that than anything. Okay. Alright, so once you get that scored, then what you can do is you can just take and just start peeling this up. If you don't want to listen to that hum, you can actually do this with the power off, which I might go ahead and do because it's also a little easier on the motors and everything, so we'll just power that down. I've got my radio on over here, And everything is working. I wanted to test the basic ins and outs before I bothered you guys to watch it all. I'm just going to come out here and see when we pull this off, it's going to go ahead and peel up this decal. And then this will give us the capability of making a much more strong connection to the actual wing. Because you see how easy that's coming up. It's like not even a thought. Okay, see there, it's wanting to lift. And even if I peel this whole thing off, that's fine. I prefer it to be that way. Because doing nothing else, even leaving the rubber bands under here, I want that tape to have good adhesion to the wing. That was something I should have done in the first place. And I honestly didn't think there'd be any consequence come of it, but there certainly has been. So, see? And then, of course, we don't need this rubber band right at the moment. We'll just take that off. And then we can come back in here, and it's quite easy to take off this other tape. Just try to avoid peeling off any of that white primer. And if you can make sure you're, yeah, see like that, that's a bummer. Probably not that big of a deal though. I might touch it up with my regular white enamel paint instead of trying to take out the spray paint and set up the paint booth and all that just for this one little teeny spot. But there's actually holes here that I had poked with a pin, and that's going to get me back to where I need to be. So pretty simple project there. So what I'll do is I'll actually take and, looks like I didn't get, that's just the adhesive backing, it's not actually the tape. So I'll actually go and peel that off as well. The more you can get off, the better. So, you can see in this general area, we've kind of got the same scenario. Now the other thing is we want to try to fix this while we're at it, okay? So we can either take this off first, or we can take it off second. I think it's going to be easier to take it off first. And you see it's wanting to pop up and take, because this decal gives some strength, I may almost need to get a brand new blade. I'm just going to get a new blade for this one step. These blades are relatively inexpensive, so if you're even questioning it, just put a new blade in. You can even take the old blade and put it back in and use it for a while longer, but just for this critical cut, I need to make sure that I can get through this decal, this vinyl decal here. So, I can hear it cutting. Remember, we're not trying to actually cut the plane. We don't care about cutting the plane at all. We're simply doing this to cut through the clear coat. So then it's got somewhere to chase down to. See this? So we'll cut up to that edge. Just making 100% certain we're not going to go beyond that cut point. Okay, so now we should be able to just peel this up. See? See how easy that is now? I mean, you end up with this relatively clean cut. And worst case scenario, it doesn't come off clean and you have to redo this decal. Which you could do a number of different ways. You could either paint it silver, or you could paint it gray, or you could go for a more scale appearance, because this actually, I don't even think it's that color in real life. I don't even know if they're gray on the Airbus A380. I think they might be white. So, and plus it depends on your carrier, if you're going to be doing a special carrier paint job on it, which would be sweet. Every once in a while somebody will give me grief about not doing a special carrier's paint job. And I just kind of like the Airbus paint scheme myself. So this is where we tried to glue it back down, which was fine. I mean, if it would have held up, I would have been fine with it, but I think we all have hindsight now. We know that wasn't probably the best move. It doesn't need to be perfectly clean, it just needs to be clean enough to get good adhesion. So now, as you can probably imagine, when we go back in there and tape this, it's going to be a lot better bite because this stuff can't just peel off immediately. So absolute worst case scenario, we put everything back exactly how it was. But in our case, we're actually going to peel off this tape that was holding the rubber bands in place. And we're just going to take this whole thing off in general. Okay. And the whole reason for this in the first place was to stiffen this whole assembly. Well, what I found is that it's actually not needing quite as much of the folds. The folds are critical because you don't get quite enough strength straight all the way down. But what I want to do is I want to stop it from bumping into this and interfering with that action. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to peel this front off. Okay, so this one seems like it's wanting to take a little bit more of that paint off than the other one did. That sucks. And see, it took a little bit off on the other side on this portion too. And every time that I had these cuts, it, of course, must be catching the edge of the cut. You can see it just looks more consistent. And this is just primer. It's not even real paint. So to be perfectly honest, I'm surprised how good it's worked. Might be a little hard to get these up. But once I peel this stuff off, then we basically start the process again of straightening that out. And we're going to emulate closer to what we did here. Okay. And I need to tape that all the way down the length. I just have it temporarily taped on there. So this weekend I fully intended to get you guys some more flight footage, but we've been working on a project that's bigger and more important than this one particular build for the YouTube channel. And for just everyday life. And I will let you more when there's more to be shared. But right now there's not. The other thing that's cool about this, we get rid of these ugly things that are taped on the bottom. I mean, they actually worked, so I don't want to completely poo-poo the idea, but I can tell you right now, it's certainly not as good looking. Okay, so now we have to find the little pinhole where we had this. This one's got a pinhole here. This is kind of sticky now because of the residue. And then the other pinhole is right about here. So let's set it down in this position. And then let's just double check and make sure we have this position right. So you got that, and it goes right to there. Perfect. Ish. So now, in order to get that thing to stay still, we're going to want another... Well, I got some tape, some wing tape, and what else did I get? Oh, I got props for the Phoenix. Went up to a bigger prop here. This is 10.6, that's an 11.6 carbon fiber. So those videos will be coming out here pretty soon. The mod video will take about 2 minutes, so it might be kind of like a mod video slash flight video hybrid. But you know me, I'm not going to just show you a mod video and make you assume that it's going to work. I'm going to actually show you that it worked. And then you can decide if you want to do it yourself. This is unfortunate, rather unfortunate that we lost that much paint. So what I need to do now is pretty obvious. And that is we're probably going to go ahead and have to get in there with a little bit of white paint. I obviously don't want to get the touch-up. I don't want to spray paint them again. So let's grab this Model Masters flat white enamel. I just use this paper clip to mix it up, which I'll also use to apply this little teeny bit of touch-up. And by the way, these ends, these blue decal things, have really worked out crappy. This comes from the factory, of course. So I'll have to redo those at some point. I might actually print a vinyl sticker, which would help a lot with that. Okay, so we hardly need any. We're just going to touch up these couple of different little spots. And then in terms of letting it dry, I may actually just hair dryer it to get it dry so we can keep working. But this enamel sets up so quick. And again, we're not necessarily trying to go for perfection here. We just want it to be kind of one solid color. Once you throw your tape over this, it's going to block access to touching it up properly. You could also just spray paint the whole thing again if you really had a lot of time on your hands, which I do not. I know that seems like such a counterintuitive thing if you've ever seen any of my videos. It's like, this guy doesn't have much time on his hands, but he spends a whole lot of time on this crap. Yep, that's pretty much the gist of it. Okay, so once this is all said and done, then my next maneuver is going to be to actually tape it down once it's kind of dried up. And should be able to take a Q-tip and spread this out a little bit too. And then sometimes people, I don't know, some people like to show a little bit of weathering on their planes. I prefer to actually weather my planes by making them dirty by using them. But, you know, like maybe a little bit of exhaust, things like that. That's kind of cool, I think. But they get dirty in real life, and they get dirty in, I mean, this is real life, I guess. It's just small, right? It's a real life plane, only small. Is that real? Yeah, it's real, just small. So, get that cap back off, and then usually my rule of thumb is I just let that dry. And then I'll come back with a brand new, fresh, clean Q-tip and just give it a little spreading so that it's not super clumpy and bumpy. Plus then this will give you an idea of like how wet is it really still. And right now this stuff is doing pretty good. It's just about to where you could call it dry. Alright, cool. So we'll just let that set up for a minute or two. And then this next step is a little tricky, so I'm going to show you how I did. I had a little better success on my second attempt, obviously. My second attempt being taping these down. And I know some of you guys said it was a little cringe-worthy to watch me do that last set, and I actually totally agree with you on that. It looks like we missed this little spot here, so while we're waiting on this paint to dry, we'll go ahead and come in here, run this extremely sharp X-Acto knife, just peel that up, and then, see it's on my thumb, get rid of it. Awesome. Okay, so one other thing we've got to do while we'll let that paint dry for a bit longer is this here is actually, it'd be reverse over on this side. And you see how it's got a little bit of a curve and wave to it. That's not necessarily on purpose, it's just kind of the way it worked out. Okay, so on this side we have a smaller spring, and then on this end we have a bigger spring. But then this thing gets taped down. Okay? So you can see we significantly changed the shape. So, if we want it to be as close to similar, because you want symmetry on these planes as much as you can get, I'm going to go ahead and just try to shorten all these angles. I'm just going to grab the open part of the angle here with a pair of pliers and just squeeze. This is still going to offer us a little bit of strength with that bend, but it's going to also get us up higher into the spoiler. And if we're up higher into the spoiler, what that does for us, it gets us away from that action on the servo action. You can see my touch-ups here if you look close enough. I add a little bit over here. Okay, so it looks like I need to fold it up here. And this will be the same, except mirrored. So we can actually fold it the same shape, and then just like when we're all done, we'll just flip it over. Okay. I hope that made sense to you viewers at home. It made sense to my brain. Okay, so I need to do another bend here. And this is just basically, you know, busy work. You're going to have to get these to match fairly close. And the only other way to do it easily would be to turn around and actually make a jig or something like that. And if you did make a jig, you'd probably have better success than I'm going to have on this. But I suppose we'll leave that up to the judge. Okay, so this one here needs to bend back a little bit. All right, let's take a look again. And again, this doesn't have to be identical, but it needs to be fairly close, or it won't probably end up giving you that symmetrical output. But now that I have a good measurement on these springs, I should be able to duplicate my stuff a little bit better. Okay, so this one needs to bend up a little bit. Okay, so this is one of my problems right here. This is this right there. And this. I'm trying to take as much of that twist out of here as I can get out of there. Once it's taped down, it pretty much will hold its shape. Need to make this one more shallow. Make this one a little bit more shallow as well. And you also notice, because it's not as much zigzag up and down, it's going to actually lengthen the control a little bit. So you can see we're getting to where we're fairly close. This needs to be actually flattened out here if it's going to agree. Okay, so now that we have that kind of in position, this paint, believe it or not, is actually, it's dry to the touch. So if we don't screw up with our tape, it should be fine going on. So I'm actually just going to look at this one more time while we just make sure we're square as we can be. And just a little bit of back and forth until you get it pretty much the way you want it. Fairly straight. Should be about what we want. This zigzag is what we want, though, just in case that wasn't already totally clear. Okay, so you see how this tape is peeled off? I didn't really do that. It was stuck on the side and it rolled down over time this weekend, because we've been busy, like I said. And so I'm going to trim this, and I'll just stick this back on. So that's the way it was. It was just sitting on the side like that. It just kind of rolled itself off. Okay, so I need this one to be wide enough to reach all the way up and down, but not so wide enough that it's like completely unwieldy. And that's what we have right now, so I gotta trim it. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to attempt to stick it down, but I have to leave myself some wiggle room so I can get that tape out. Okay. So you got that down. Now I'm just going to fold it over on itself and just touch it back down over here on the flap. Okay, so I'm touching it down. And when I cut this, it's going to want to fall down, so I'm going to put my pinky under there. Okay. Ran into the landing gear doing that. Dang it. Okay, so now I can push this tape down so it holds it in position. Cool. So, not a perfect execution, but it was good for what we're doing. That one was a little bit better. The objective, of course, is to tape as much of it as you can. Of course, I'm starting to get bubbles here. That's not good. So I'm going to work down the middle of the bubble. Just try to work it out. I did get it out of that one. Okay. So wherever the bubbles are, normally you would just push from the middle, and that would resolve that. Prevent it from happening. You can also take a little bit of heat to this, and it will take care of that. Now that's also going to help close this up so that it doesn't, you don't want these feathers to be all over the place because we don't have independent controls on each of the panels. So now let's tape the other side. We'll do the exact same process. Difference is this one's just so much easier, so I'm just double checking where it's located. If it's where it needs to be, then I can go ahead and apply the tape. And then I need to get this tape down up there on the edge. Okay? So I went a little bit too far, so I'm just going to peel that back as slow as I can. Okay? Cool. Now that I've got some tape binding this in position, I should be able to peel this off. Okay, so now this. Cool. Got it in there. Okay, so now that that's taped down, I want to try to trim that just a little bit more. Because I don't know if you guys can tell in the video, but there's just a touch of overlap there, and I do not want that stuff to try to hold the spoiler down. Okay, so we got just that little chunk there. Alright, cool, so that's down. You can tell where that needs to be now, pretty exactly. Then this, of course, is stuck down really bad because it's got that adhesive that had been. But you can see how much nicer that is when you don't have to worry about it ripping off the tape. Alright, so now, let's look at the bottom of this. You can see we didn't do anything there to keep that from sticking. But what we're going to do is ultimately we'll be replacing the spring, and then we're going to be taping this on there. So at this point we can go ahead and start rough fitting this piece, and then we can make sure that our mechanism is going to be free, and it's going to also move this the way we want it to. So we want that up toward the top, or really close toward the top. There's enough adhesive on here from that tape previously that it just kind of holds it in place, and you can tell we'll have to do some bending and stuff, which is not a big deal. We kind of knew that, or at least I knew that. Okay. So hold that. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and get this temped on here. Just a little bit of tape in two spots probably. Make sure you fold it so you can get the tape off fairly easy later. I want to tape it closer here. I taped it way back here on the other side, and that kind of didn't really work great. It was allowed to flop around instead of opening up the inboard spoiler. Okay, so we got that down. So now you can kind of see the action we're going for here. Okay. Okay, so it's kind of having a tendency to want to collapse funny, so I'm going to actually move this up just a little bit. Okay, so now when we tape this, we do have to keep in mind that that metal's in a different spot, so it's actually going to run into the flap here. We may have to kind of press that into the flap so that it gives somewhere for it to go. And then we have to now go ahead and make our springs, which is super easy. So we'll do that right now. We'll just measure out 1 inch and mark it. One-inch mark. And then 3.5 inches. So we'll 1, 2, 3.5. Okay. And then 1 more inch and we'll mark it. So that's where we need to do our bends. So we can cut it first and then bend it. And we're about out of time on this, but I'll probably go ahead and keep this video going, because I don't want to make this a multi-part series. It's just a pain at this point in the project. So now I also I drew the angle. Okay, see this angle here, guys? That's what we're going to do on this. Okay, so now we just need to take our 1 inch mark. And we'll go ahead and fold it at 90 degrees, approximately. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little more. Probably not super critical. And then that becomes this angle here. This is fine, and then this one needs to make the other angle. And that's how you tension the spring, is by making it at this approximate angle, okay? It's hard to see on the camera, I bet. But then we want this to pierce in at the almost the exact same spot. So you see how we did this over here? It's in right next to the inboard portion. And so I'm just going to study this for a second. I'm going to say, okay, so it's inboard of this, and it's right at the hinge, and it's at a bit of an angle. And I'm just pushing it straight into the foam. You don't want to go such a steep angle that it pokes through the bottom. You don't want to go at such a shallow angle that you poke out the top. Okay, then once you're ready, then this can get, it needs to fine tune a little bit here. You see this bend? I didn't quite get that tight enough here. So grab these pliers and get that done right now. Okay, so we got a nice angle. Open this up, slide it into our receiver here. Alright, cool. And then of course we can see how this looks with just a little test piece of tape. Fold off both ends, because these ones are kind of tricky to get out sometimes. You want it to be similar looking. It doesn't need to be exact. Okay. You see that pulls it back down. And you don't want it to be so vigorous that your servo won't make the action work. But you want it to be vigorous enough that it counteracts any sort of lift that would pull it up under normal flight conditions. So it's got to have a little bit of pull to it. So now we do the same thing here, except we're going to do a different size. See, this one's protruding out the top a little bit. That's not good. That's definitely not what I was going for, but okay, so we have a measurement here, which happens to be 1 1/4 inches. Okay, so we'll have 1 inch of penetration on both ends, and then 1/4 inch, 1 1/4 inch in the middle. So we'll just pull this out, tape measure, nothing special. So at 1 inch we'll make a mark. We'll go to 1 1/4. Make another mark. And then at 1 inch we'll go ahead and make a mark. Now this spring will be a lot stronger than the last spring, because it's got less material to give only 1 1/4 inch worth. I really appreciated seeing Andrew Newton's video, showing how to do this, and I've seen a lot of he's got a lot of good stuff, guys. Really skilled builder. Okay, so this is going to slip in like that, except of course over here it's going to be on the outboard portion. And we go to the mark. You probably want to do kind of a similar angle to what you had on the other one. Excuse me. To start, of course. Now I got mine a little bit close to the crack there. That's just not right sounding, but okay, so we're going to be something like this, and we'll just give a little penetration. Okay. So as you can see, you can also use those to prop up the spoilers while you're working, which is kind of handy. But in my case, it's going to be used to pull them down. So let's do that next with a temporary piece of tape. Fold over both ends. Once we're satisfied, then we'll actually tape the whole surface just like we did on the face, but we got to glue these in first. We got to test the action a couple of times. Okay. Oh yeah, pulls it down like a charm, like a lucky charm. Okay, time for a test. Test run. On, throttle cuts on. Throw that down. Plug in the battery. Okay, let everything come up to initiate. That's kind of weird. Throttle cuts off. Okay, throttle cuts back on. We're good. See how much this side comes up and that side doesn't? Probably because this is taped all the way out here and this one's not. So, but let's test our spoilers. Okay. So we probably have a little bit too much pressure here. So we may have to redesign that slightly. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and tape. Get this to tape this here. So that this stays put. Now we don't even care if it's oversized and hanging over the end and stuff. Okay. Now we try again. See how much better that looks. So now it's really hard to be sure if this is going to be exactly even, but I have to imagine it's going to be a lot more even. But we're not getting enough deployment on the inboard portion. Here and here, which would be normally known as kind of like the ground brakes or the speed brakes. These are more used for in-flight. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the amount of purchase from the spring first and see if we can get what we need out of that. Okay. So I took a real piece of tape on this one and put it on there for some stupid reason, instead of using a temporary piece like I've been doing otherwise. So now there's two ways to adjust these. You can pull them out and you can straighten them out a little bit, which means there's a similar amount of tension, but it stops applying the tension earlier. Okay. And that might not be sufficient for this. I bet it's not going to be sufficient. My hope is when we're all done, then we can make sure that these control rods are more similarly, they're going to be the same length. That should make everything work nicely. Plus the other thing is this isn't deploying early enough because this isn't bent right yet. Okay, so you see how high up that is now? Plus we got our, it's not pulling it down enough, so we'll have to release it, pull it out, work our magic, be prepared to tape it back down. Whoops. And there's quite a bit of guessing checking this, so if there's too much guessing and checking going on, then I will pause the video. But for now, we've only had a couple of guess and check attempts, so I think we're good for now. Okay, so let's see what it looks like. Radio's over here. So I can definitely tell that the inboard portion's just barely lifting, and I know what the problem is. It's completely a problem with where we're coming out on this rod here. So what I need to do is I need to re-engineer this a little bit. So first thing I'm going to do is untape that so I'm not fighting it. Okay, this one's untaped. Okay, so we can just leave these things off to the side. So what we need to do is we'll probably have to bend this up by squishing this here, which will bring that out, and then I can squish it here to make it so that it doesn't protrude over the top of that surface. And you probably don't need quite that much, but for now let's just go with it. See where it's going, guys. It's kind of keeping away from the getting caught in funny places there. This is part of the guess and check I was talking about, guys. You just gotta go through it. Unless you're a lot better at math than I am, then you can potentially calculate something. Okay, so you see how it's overlapping that? That's not the way it's going to be when we're actually running it, so I almost am inclined to just cut that off and see if I can get rid of it. Because what's going to happen is, even though you're applying pressure out here, I should be able to apply pressure right at the spring point. So I could hypothetically cut this, and I'm a little reluctant to do this, but not so reluctant that I'm not going to waste my time. Okay, so that's gone now. We saved a little bit of rod. Okay. So now we can adjust that a little bit more definitively, and we won't have to cope with the interaction of those two pieces together, which is good. That's definitely a good thing. It's a good thing, like Martha Stewart says. Here we go. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes. The only thing I don't like is that it's more prone to deployment under normal circumstances, normal flight circumstances. I mean, the ailerons are going to deploy this as well. I'd rather not have this deployed much. So if that's what we want to do, we just have to move this down just a hair. And remember, whatever we do on this side, we're going to do our very best to get the other side similar. Okay? So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to tape this next. But for now, I think I'm happy with this too, but I don't know that I need this out here that far. It's just going to cause a problem eventually. See how far out it goes? So I'm going to trim that down. Like, yeah. And we got another piece. And these pieces can go hang out with the other little pieces I've got. Crap. Just don't let these hang out in your carpet. They might hang out in your toe next. Okay, so keeping in mind that when you're all done with this, you know, you're going to be gluing this in, and you'll have a big long piece of tape here. So you won't have as much, you know, sloppiness looking here. Okay? Which is always good. I hate this intermediate stage where everything looks sloppy. Okay, so this one here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to trim it. This piece, that is. That's shot all the way over. That's good. And then this piece we've taped all the way at the end. So we'll actually go ahead and just relocate that tape a little bit so we can trim this down just a bit. So we don't need to go like totally crazy here. We can just trim a little bit. this play with its friends. I guess that other one will just have to, I'll pick it up with my toe. Alright, so I would like that to be pulled down a little bit tighter too, now that we have the overlap issue resolved. I'm a little bit nervous about this one because I've bent it so many different times. I was kind of doing this as my prototype, so I might go ahead and just rebuild this one reluctantly. So remember guys, we'll go 1 inch out, mark it, 1.25 inches, mark it, and 1 more inch, mark it. Okay. Throw away your stuff so it's out of your way. And then we're going to clip it. Lay that out of the way. First bend's easy, just a 90-degree angle. Didn't quite get our 90 there. Usually we'll have to overshoot it twice to get it right. Okay, so now I'm just going to go like that. Okay, so there's our spring mechanism. Super simple. Multi-rotor go. Thank you for the heads up on this. I've seen this video from Andrew Newton a few times, but I hadn't thought about it for this. That was a good call. Whoops, did that backward. So you see what's going on here, guys. I made my bend backward. Really easy to do that. So there's two options. You can either bend a new piece, but then, gosh, how would you even know which way you're doing it? Hold on, am I thinking this through right? Yes, I am. It's always going to be wrong. So really, we'll just bend it the other way. And that's only one bend. You should be fine to get away with a couple of those, because you have to overbend it so much to get it in position. I mean, you got to remember, I did that like 5 or 6 times before we got to the point where we were testing it on this video. So, should be totally fine. But don't tinker around. Don't keep it lifted up at a high angle. I'm so reluctant to glue that thing in. I don't want to have to glue it in. Maybe I don't have to glue it in. I don't know. Maybe I'll just try without gluing. Maybe I'll get it in there and then glue it later. That's probably what we'll do. Okay, so this time I have to actually go ahead and make this wide enough to cover the whole surface. Keeping it neat. And get that spring on there. So it'll be super, super easy. Not really. It's going to be a huge pain. Okay. I just actually taped over the top of that, so we'll see how that works. And that rubber band can go away as far as I'm concerned. It will be in just mere moments. Okay. Oops. Oh, you son of a tape lover. Okay, here we go. So now this, unacceptable. See what's going on here, guys? We've got our hinge. Even though it's springing it back, it's not springing it far enough, and that's because of the way that we've got it taped here. Okay, so I'm actually going to peel it up just a little bit, and I'm just going to cut the tape at an angle to relieve that. See if we get enough. We have not yet. What am I doing wrong here? Well, that sucks. I didn't want to have to redo this, but I guess I am going to have to redo it. Ow! Right into my thumb. See how it's pulled back? See that, guys? Very interesting. I'm going back to my original one. We'll see if we can get this one to work. I've run into this issue a few times where I make something and I think I'll make a little bit better for the final. Then you make it for the final and you're like, wow, it kind of sucks for the final. Or you run into some problem that you hadn't anticipated. Duplicating it. Okay, so we got that taped down. Ooh, that pulled it down better. Okay, so let's see what this does now. Okay, so that tape that's holding that down is causing problems. Plus, it's bent, so there's too much spring tension now. I think you guys kind of get the idea. It's basically back and forth until you have it the way you like it. Which is basically what we ran into before. That's how we had to do it. Okay, so now this time I need to tape the bottom of this. And that's going to be a little bit scary. But I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. So that's much too long. So now, I don't know, this time maybe I'll just leave that tape in there that's already there. That might be a lot easier and more secure way of doing it. Don't have to worry about it slipping so much. And all I have to do is just get this one piece to be lifted. I think I was running it like that actually on this side so that it was flat. I didn't accomplish my goal there. You see what I'm talking about? So it runs into the other piece like that. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we got it like that. Falls down. Everybody's happy. Okay, cut this off, and now we have to trim all the rest of this crap off of here. Now this is where having a sharp X-Acto knife might make this a little easier, because you could trim that as well with the X-Acto knife. But it has to be really sharp for this. Okay. Don't even try it with a dull knife. You'll just end up for sure cutting yourself. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, so now we'll do the same thing up here. That was a lot easier. Okay, cool. Alright, so now we need to, before we actually press this down, we'll just pop that around the other side, and then we'll go ahead and press it down a little bit. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that's perfect, but I think it's more, you know, like a permanent, it's got more of a permanent feel to it, in my opinion. However, I'm not crazy about the way that spring is working in that one spot. I mean, it's pulling it down, just not enough. Maybe there's too much play on the spring itself. Maybe if we glued it in, it would solve that problem. Well, let's see how it works when we move the ailerons. Ooh, yeah. See, we're not hitting anything now. Okay, cool. So I would say let's deal with the inboard portion here in a minute. we'll just have to deal with both sides at once. You know, there's no getting around it. This technically is done, with the exception of one very satisfying detail, which you guys will surely get a kick out of. And you're going to think, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, baby. Get off of there. You ugly rubber. Anytime you can get something like that off of your plane, it makes you feel good. Now this one's a little bit different because we're also acting to cover up the servo. So I'm actually going to cut it like this. Right kind of where the rubber band is. Because we have a super sharp X-Acto knife, we can get away with this. It's going to sound like deja vu, but don't even try it if you're not using an X-Acto knife that's super sharp. You will cut something you don't mean to. Which might be your finger. Might be your dog. Might be your airplane. Might be your rubber band. But either way, it could be devastating. Okay. That is such a good feeling to get that ugliness off of there. So it looked like such a wash until now. You know, like, oh, you didn't really improve anything. Yes, we did, guys. That's so much better. And by the way, that does look bad. I admit it. I got to figure out how to cover that up better. Alright, so I'm going to do the other side. You've seen this side. I'll probably end up having to just depress this into the flap or something so that it can fall down better. And then I'll just have to undo this and tape a steeper joint in there or something. But for now, you guys know what you're going to see. So I'm probably going to call it quits for now, and then I'll come back and show you the final outcome. Let's at least get this side neat and tidy first. Alright guys, one more look before we come back. It's going to be awesome though. Oh yeah. Okay. See you in a few, guys. Alright guys, so we've got flaps, spoilers. I want you guys to see how much more even they are. Landing flaps, spoiler deployment. So, and then it looks like this one here is just kind of wanting to lift up a little bit on the top. But so far, I ended up going to a 2-inch wide here, 2-inch wide spring, which seems to have helped a lot. And then thing that's most cool about this is now I don't have to worry about losing those rubber bands. So we'll have to wait and see how it's going to work. One real quick side note, guys. We're coming up on the next project, and this is going to be involved in it here pretty soon. I may come back to this one after a little bit. We're going to get some more flight footage for you, but I'm not going to work on the LEDs yet. But this is what I'm planning on using. This is a Turnigy SBAC, which is a switching BEC, battery eliminating circuit, or eliminator circuit, or whatever you want to call it. Basically what this does is it takes 8 through 26 volts DC in, and it puts a maximum output current of 5 amps at 5 volts or 6 volts selectable. So what's cool about that is I will have power for stuff that's important to this plane that will not be interfering with the power that's necessary to run my motors. Now, it's all going to be energized by one pack or two, but the whole idea behind this is that this will allow us to, and I haven't decided how I'm going to handle it yet, but I may power the receiver, and then I can energize just certain subsets off of one pair or the other pair of ESCs. And the rationale there is if you have one blow up, then you wouldn't completely lose control of the plane. Primary flight control surfaces here, or we run the high load surfaces like the flaps, and then we run the LEDs and the strobes and all that crap on this circuit. Only thing I don't like about it is it's one more device that has to actually be installed here. Not the end of the world though, we'll make it work. So the way that gets installed is we actually desolder these, or cut the heat shrink back, and then we'll solder in the red and the black here. And then on the output side is just a servo cable, so you can feed the receiver, or you can feed by taking out the positive and negative in parallel at any point on the receiver or a group of servos. And then you would just simply detach your red wire so that you're no longer energizing the circuit from the ESC. You'd be energizing it from the SPEC. Okay? 10,000 foot view item there. I just wanted to show you that. And that's a cheap thing. It's cheap insurance. But as you can see, the decal hasn't, I mean, honestly, it could have just been cut straight too, I don't know. But I was never a big fan of this fakey looking gray thing anyway. So for now, I'm happy with it. I think it's going to work better when I'm flying. And you guys are going to get to see it. It's nice and smooth now. Pops up a little. Pops up a lot. Down a little. Down all the way. Flaps up. So there you have it, guys. The Airbus A380. She'll live again. And what a cool plane it's turned out to be, isn't it, really? And not only that, but it flies so scale because you can fly it so slow. And when I say slow, I mean relatively slow compared to planes like the Airbus A330-600 by Supreme-Hobbies. Beautiful plane. Lots of the stuff that I've had to work really hard to install. And on the Airbus A380, but this plane is still heavier. Quite a bit heavier, and so you have to fly it faster. And look how narrow the wing chord is. Look how huge this is. And that's not by mistake, that's a scale detail. So, and then if you go over here and juxtapose that to the Airbus A320, which I also cut flaps into, the flaps made a humongous improvement. But then I went over the top and did leading edge slats and all this other crap that just made it not end up working good. By the way, I don't have any intentions of doing leading edge slats on this because the wing droop plus leading edge slats would just be way too complicated for the size of this plane. And just all the other stuff we've done. If I was going to do something like that, I'd use micro UMX servos or something like that, and I would just have to cut. But I'd have to do 2 on each surface, and it would be so much load. And there again, of course, you got an S-Spec like this, you could probably handle something like that. But you will eventually run out of power, and you're going to run out of the flight time too. So for now, let's keep it awesome the way it is. Come back for more, guys. I'm really glad you're here with us. I'm glad to have your audience, and I appreciate you coming back every time. Give us a like. Check the links in the description below. You can really help to support the channel if you buy your next receiver. Doesn't amount to much on our channel, but boy, I tell you what, if a lot of you guys end up buying little items like this, it really does help to fund our channel. So we appreciate you doing it. But in the meantime, enjoy one more last look.